Hi guys, Brindley Little here from your Land Partner and Property Developers Academy, coming to you for your next instalment of 100 in 100. This is instalment number 39. Working our way through the full development appraisal at this stage, and we're getting towards the end of this process and culminating essentially in putting a deal and a proposal together to then negotiate and hopefully secure with the landowner. And on that note, today's topic within the full development appraisal, as you know, there are 9 areas that we look at, 9 pillars within the full development appraisal process. And today's pillar that we're looking into is deal structure. Now, at this stage, we're not looking at the absolute minute details of how we're going to structure a deal, but we need to establish some fundamentals in terms of how we can put proposals together. And a lot of that is based on balancing what you're looking to, how you're looking to structure a deal, ideally for you in terms of the resources that you have available to you, and what will work out, quite well for you financially, possibly, and also obviously what is going to deliver the objectives of the landowner or vendor. So in many cases, you could deliver a land value of say £500,000, in which case a straightforward sale, you'd be looking at paying £500,000 on exchange and completion. But if you start listening to and digging down into what the vendor's looking to achieve through the transaction, you may find that they might be looking for say £50,000 immediately and quite happy to wait for the remainder at a later point in time. So that sends you down a certain path when it comes to deal structure. So you first have to start with your vendor communication and conversations that you're having and the details that you're kind of gleaning from that process. You're then looking at the numbers in terms of whether the deal is viable, working back to a residual valuation, working back from a GDV and accounting for all your costs and things like that. Because the deal structure, it doesn't necessarily affect the value of the land, because the value of the land is the value of the land, right? It's a residual valuation. It's GDV minus your cost minus your profit equals the land value. However, where a good deal structure can, what a good deal structure can do is enhance and maximize the amount of money and the value that the landowner can receive, and obviously you can get benefit from as well. So it doesn't necessarily increase the land receipt, but it could increase or help the landowner retain as much of that receipt and of that value as possible. So you got to establish which way you're going to go down, and generally speaking, there are 2 routes to go down. You either go down a control contract route, or you go down a purchase contract route. Now, a purchase contract route would just generally be that you're keeping things as simple as possible, and you're looking to exchange and complete either in one fell swoop, or it might be conditional on certain things happening. So an unconditional purchase or a conditional purchase. A lot of deals done in the development industry are conditional of some kind, whether that's, and probably the most common is subject to achieving planning permission. But obviously, if you're dealing with sites that have already got planning permission in place, and that it's a good permission, a good consent, you feel that you can make some money out of it, you come up with a residual valuation, you're happy with all the conditions that are attached to the planning, then you might potentially go down the unconditional route. It's very rare that we do that ourselves, mainly because we're dealing with sites that don't have planning permission, or the planning permission can be enhanced. So we are normally doing some kind of conditional purchase on that basis. The other often common way in acquiring sites is using a control contract. So that could be something like an option agreement or an exchange with a delayed completion, which is kind of a hybrid between a purchase contract and a control contract, because you are actually committing to buying it. You're just pushing a lot of the money and the completion a lot further down the line. But with control contracts, the benefit to the developer on the buying side is potentially a lot less money up front. They're often used with more speculative developments and sites, options, promotion agreements, things like that. And you want to share the risk and share the reward. So it's about assessing what type of deal structure is appropriate for the piece of land and appropriate for everybody concerned. One favorable way of moving forward with a potential deal structure, and it's something that we do quite a lot of, is if you ever find yourself where you've done your high level numbers, you've had discussions with landowners, and you are somewhat of a disagreement in terms of, say, end values. For example, you've got GDV of 2 million. Their GDV or their agent's GDV comes back at 2.4, and obviously your land value is less than what they're hoping to achieve. Then a deal structure along the lines of agreeing a baseline value for the development and baseline value for the land, plus an overage clause, and we'll go through overage clauses and different control and purchase contracts in more detail as we do more of these 100 and 100. But essentially an overage whereby if more value is actually achieved further down the line, then that value is shared, often in the lion's share going to the landowner, and you as the developer receiving some as well. So you're sharing risk and sharing reward of something that is unknown. And it's often a really good way of kind of that happy medium when it comes to maybe some slight discrepancies and disagreements between your value and the landowner's value. A key thing to realize when it comes to deal structure, don't forget this is within the appraisal process. So as I said before, we're not doing a massive amount of detail at this stage on the deal itself, but we do want to understand things like timescales, things like money up front that's involved, and the conditions if it's a conditional contract and things like that, because we're going to be putting those into our proposal document or our proposal for the consideration of the landowner, and obviously taking that through to negotiation. But one of the keys to deal structure is because it has such an effect on a lot of different areas of the development appraisal and of the viability and chances of actually getting a deal across the line. Obviously, as I mentioned before, it can affect things like the costs. For example, if you've allowed, as we've talked previously about funding, and you've allowed maybe 10% interest rate per annum for funding the land purchase, and you aren't required with your deal structure to hand over 100% of the land purchase price, say the £500,000 value, and you strike a deal where the landowner gets 100,000 now and 400,000 on an exchange delay completion, or with just a long stop date conditional contract where they're getting something at the end, then effectively they are financing, if you like, or helping you with the finance. Certainly you haven't got to raise that money or put your own money into it, so that therefore should attract a bit of an interest rate. Therefore you can pay the vendor a little bit more money, and you can show them that and show them how different deal structures can affect the amount of money that they receive. But the problem with deal structures is because there's more than one way to skin a cat, as it were. You can put deals together, start with a blank piece of paper essentially, and the difficulty with starting and having the possibility of going in a lot of different ways is that you can often become a bit too creative. You can come up with these elaborate sort of plans and ideas and structures that will help you and help the landowner, but effectively you've got to satisfy the funders. And if you're too creative with your deal structures, the deal won't get funded. So it's really prudent. You're not going to know who's going to often not going to know who exactly is going to be funding your deal during the appraisal stage. But it's certainly worth connecting yourself in with members of your team, you know, brokers and any investors that you might be dealing with, and any development finance companies that you may have relationships with, or know people or experienced developers that you can talk to prior to doing these deals, to sort of say, well, if we structured it in this way, would this satisfy the funder? And then you can, you know, obviously proceed on that basis. And that's often a good way of using that third party element when you're entering negotiations and you're talking to the landowner, because you can say, well, we've got to structure it in this certain way because it's got to satisfy the landowner, the funder, as it were. So it is a fine balance, but during the appraisal stage, it's just getting yourself a good understanding and good handle on where you can take it. And we're looking ideally then to move that through into the negotiation phase, which is coming up soon on 100 and 100, whereby we're putting forward not just one potential way of structuring the deal and doing the deal, which I will elaborate on in another session, but we're putting forward multiple offers, and that's key. Obviously, you've got to do your research and ensure that those different deal structures work for you, and obviously deliver different plus points for the landowner. So hopefully you found that useful. And join us again for more 100 and 100. We're getting towards the end of the appraisal process now, and we'll be moving on to negotiation. So take care, and I'll see you again.